here and say that he's going to need that chance.
Setting us all up for a nice free practice 3 session before we go qualifying a little later on. And this is the time where you really do not want to make any mistakes. But of course, conditions slightly cooled. The track has indeed rubbered in. Karun Chandok, you are a quick runner and you have made it up to the commentary box with me. How does that all set us up for FP3 this afternoon?
I'm going to get rid of the myth first of all that I am a quick runner. I am not a quick runner. It was a lot of big foot steps. But one of the big things, Harry, to point out is the wind has completely died down. It is so still out there. And considering this is one of the windiest places we go on the entire F1 calendar. It's quite amazing. I've never experienced a day with such low wind conditions. So that makes it predictable for the drivers and the engineers when they're trying to get their setup right for qualifying. But as you said, the track temperature much cooler as well. Just 32 degrees now. That's a good 12, 15 degrees cooler than what we saw yesterday.
Yeah, it certainly is. I mean, normally the wind can really play an impact because it's funneled by all the buildings around, particularly the differences in size between some of those in the old town and the high skyscrapers too really funnels the wind at certain points in the track. But at the moment then, not being a factor. Well, just a couple of minutes then away from the green light to get FP3 going. So let's check in for the first time this afternoon and head down to Ted Kravitz.
Hello, Harry. Hello, Karun. Hello, everybody. Now, never let it be said that the Ferrari mechanics don't have a sense of humour. Mara, can you hold this for a second? Can you just hold this for a second? Listen to what they're playing. He's even got that thing when you do, that terrible DJs do when you do the klaxon. He's playing Will Smith because Big Willie is in the house. Will Smith is here. Dove Willie, where is Will? He's here somewhere. Where is Will Smith? Anyway, never let it be said. Oh, there he is. There he is. There's the big man. There he goes. He's got a little photo with the Ferrari mechanics. So, in tribute to Will Smith, they've got getting jiggy with it on the stereo here down at Ferrari. Not the scene set I thought I was going to give you, Harry, but that's what I've got for you. But what a great scene down here. And if we want to put it back to motor racing for a little bit, yeah, look at this. What a great scene down here. He's got good taste, doesn't he, Will Smith, hanging out at Ferrari? Because they look like the pace setters so far. Charles Leclerc, putting it very simply, we are quick out there. And he was the one that crashed yesterday. So really, it is Ferrari looking to cement their advantage. Oh, he's going on a tour. There we go, Will's going on a tour. He's looking to cement their advantage for the rest of the day, but make no mistake about it, they're all at a certain level. So Red Bull, Mercedes, Ferrari maybe a little bit ahead, and McLaren are at the level of the others. What we're not seeing this weekend from McLaren is the advantage that they've enjoyed for the last couple of races. Right, Sergio Perez is the first out on track. Back to you out there. We've had enough Will Smith just for the moment, but I'm sure there'll be more throughout the weekend.
Well, Ted, one thing I'd be interested to see is what downforce levels the teams have chosen to run, because they would have had all of their practices yesterday, but then overnight, the teams back in the factories would have been running a whole load of simulations, would have had the drivers in the simulator doing their overnight shifts, and trying to optimize and choose their downforce level for the rest of this weekend. And they'd have to factor in that the track is rubbered up. So, Ted, I don't know if you get a chance throughout the session to have a look and see if there are any teams still doing back-to-back comparisons, or if they've made any changes from yesterday. That would be interesting to hear about.
Yeah, no, certainly will, Karun. Just eyeballing, so the two that I noticed were particularly different yesterday were Piastri and Norris. And just taking a look at it, they look much more similar on rear wing angle today. And if anything, just having a look, Norris seems to have, no, I think they're the same. I think they're actually the same. I think they've all converged on with the what the computers say is the best wing level. But listen, Karun, I've just got the eyes down here in the pit lane. I'll keep an eye across it. You have a look on the TV pictures and see if there's a change. But I'd be surprised if there are changes from car to car on wing levels. But we'll see.
We shall see. Thank you very much, Ted. We'll check back in with you soon. But then FP3 very much underway then. And indeed, Sergio Perez, first car out on track. The two Saubers out there, Yuki Tsunoda and this man, Max Verstappen, who, well, Red Bull, one of their best Fridays in a little while, actually. Wasn't without its issues, but overall, a marked improvement.
But this is very unusual. We don't ever see Red Bull.
It is a little bit damp, the truck.
Yep, we have had that little sprinkle of rain, which has stopped, I think it has to be said, so it'll clear up pretty soon. But we never, ever see Red Bull running straight away at the start of a session, unless it's been rained off on a Friday or something like that. So when we've had a normal dry day on a Friday, this is unusual. And this is, I think, a sign of this Red Bull team trying to find answers, trying to unlock some of the, just this inherent potential that they still think is in that car, but they haven't been able to put onto the track. Perez comes straight back into the pits. He's doing a lot of weaving around. and he has come back in. I can try to see what Verstappen's up to. He's about 20 seconds behind Perez on the track, and yeah, they're going to wheel Checo back into the garage. Verstappen, I could see on the onboard camera we have in the commentary box, also weaving around. So they've both gone out, maybe just check the track conditions before they come back in and prepare their run plan.
Yeah, so it certainly was, though, a marked improvement. And you mentioned it earlier, though, Prix, after yesterday, I know it's still only practice, but actually, in terms of the top 4 teams all battling it out, it seems like we do have that. But also, with Perez in the game, it does feel like we have got 8 cars in the running, and this is how, well, the convergence has been since Bahrain through to Monza.
Yeah, I mean, it does appear now that McLaren have had the quickest car for a little while. You'd say, really, since Budapest onwards, it's been a clear advantage, maybe even earlier than that. You know, probably Barcelona, actually, I would say. So, yeah, I think it's, you know, it bodes well, doesn't it? We've got 8 very, very exciting race weekends coming up. Bernie, you've made it up here.
I have indeed, Corinne. Brilliant, and not running as fast as you by any stretch of the imagination. But yeah, it's interesting to see those cars. I think yesterday, I need to go back and check, but I think in one of the sessions, the earlier sessions, P1, Verstappen also did an outlap on the soft tyre before running it later on in the session. So I don't know if they're gaining something by that, or at least believe they're gaining something by that. And we've seen now the sort of standard install lap happening for some others. It'll be interesting to see of the people. Most of the field at the moment have 2 sets of hard tyres available, the exception being Mercedes with 2 sets of medium tyre available. So interesting to see how many hold on to that. Now, many people at home will be asking, but Baku's normally a one-stop race, why do you need an extra medium or hard tyre? Well, one of the reasons for that is Baku is often a race that has safety cars. The last 5 have had a safety car or a VSC. So holding on to that extra tyre just allows a little bit of margin if there's a safety car, a VSC or a red flag at some point later in the race after you've made your 1 mandatory pit stop. So interesting to see at the end of this session which team thinks they have the pace to get through qualifying with 1 set less soft tyres.
So do you think then that Mercedes reckon if they do get that scenario where they're late with a safety car or a VSC, then because the race will get broken up even more, they'll be fine with the medium? They wouldn't need 2 sets of hard tyres, whereas the assumption is everyone else thinks they might need 2 sets of hards.
Exactly, or everyone was unsure of the degradation coming into this race, so you make your decision before you do any running on Friday. Alternatively, maybe if the race doesn't have any safety cars or any VSCs, you'll spend the longest amount of the race on the hard tyre. So Mercedes maybe feel that by running it on Friday, they have had the benefit of knowing how to set it up, what wing angles to put in the car, how the drivers feel on it. So they have gained information that the others haven't so far on a tyre that you're likely to spend the majority of the race on.
Right. Well, the other thing is some teams are down on running in general. George Russell in the Mercedes yesterday with those, well, suspected engine issues at the time, curtailing his running. He'll be desperate to try and get more action today. But it was a good run for Friday for this man, Oliver Bearman, stepping in place of Kevin Magnussen this weekend. Magnussen, who serves his 1 race ban for 12 penalty points. And, well, I think the penalty point system has now come under quite a lot of scrutiny as to how fair and how consistent that might be.
Yeah, but I'm a bit surprised with that, to be honest. I think the penalty point system is actually quite fair. I think it kind of reflects what we get in real life. If you do something wrong, you get points. I think where the questions have come is in the way they've been dished out, because personally I don't believe that Magnussen deserved to get 2 penalty points for the incident in Monza. There were some earlier where he did deserve it, but I think that's where, if we look at the penalty points that have been handed out throughout the season to all of the drivers, there are question marks in terms of the consistency of when those have been given. I don't know, but what do you think? I don't have a problem with the 12-point system. I think it's actually quite a good system.
We have lots of penalties available where you can be harshly applied at that time. So time-second penalty or a drive-through penalty or all these things for, you know, very harsh offences at the time. And the penalty point system creeps up on it. It is, you know, one of the softest systems of reprimand that we have, because, you know, there's many incidents needed in order to get that ban. Obviously, a ban appears harsh, but it is creeped up over time. And, you know, just to say, this, you know, whatever you think of the incident in Monza specifically, like any of us, if you were driving on 10 penalty points, you would be driving squeaky, squeaky clean, no?
The idea, though, right, is that they look at everything in isolation. And if you go back through a lot of the incidents, it's the dishing out of 2, maybe 3 penalty points for similar incidents where, you know, in Magnussen and Gasly's case, they both carried on. It was both fine. Hulkenberg in that same race going into the side of Tsunoda, it pretty much ended Tsunoda's race down at turn 1. He took a driver out of the race. That was the consequence of that, and therefore I believe that was a harsh penalty was warranted. But for 12 points across a 24 race season now, is there an argument to say maybe actually it should be extended in terms of when the ban comes?
No, because if we look back, it's been a decade that the system's been in place. This is the first time someone has been banned. So it's not like we're losing a driver, you know, every year with this. It's I don't believe that is the issue. I think the issue is more the root of the problem, which is how and when the points are dished out.
Well, in terms of who's got the most points after Kevin Magnussen, right now it's Fernando Alonso and Sergio Perez who have 8 apiece. Lance Stroll with 5, and then Nico Hulkenberg has 4 points to their name. So just write that down, because it's quite hard to find out who has what penalty points over the course of the season. It's not always written out for us and delivered to us. But a brilliant shot looking back there. Yuki Tsunoda, just he's been doing the most running at the moment, just come back into the pitch. Ricardo and Alonso out on track at the moment, but a little bit quiet. But for those on the track, and indeed you can watch every session this season from onboard any of the 20 drivers and listen in on their team radio. To get started, all you need to do is download the Sky Sports app to your phone or tablet device, log in with your Sky ID and head to the Sky Sports F1 channel to choose your driver. Sky Glass, Sky Q and Sky Stream customers, you can also access this experience via the interactive button on your remote control and ride on board with Fernando Alonso right now as he's making his way round on track, coming onto the start-finish straight, or indeed Lance Stroll has now joined his teammate out on track. But it's been a bit of a slow start to FP3 as we build up for qualifying. But Bernie, I'm just curious actually, overnight in between FP2 and FP3, how late is everybody working? You know, what are they doing in between these sessions? I know there's probably a lot of number crunching going on, but what can you bring us into the engineering room?
Yeah, so into the engineering, there is a lot of number crunching going on. There's a lot of different departments, as you know, so some will be focused specifically on driver performance. How can one driver improve versus another driver? Others will be locked on car performance. Is the aerodynamics performing as expected, the suspension, the steering, all of these elements. So different people will be focused on different aspects of the car. You know, as we look at Mercedes there will have been a full investigation into Russell's engine. What can they do with that? Was the oil sample that we believe they got correct? Do they need to change any radiators? So the first thing you're trying to get into the mechanics in the garage is what needs to be changed on the car quickly, that needs to be done that evening. The mechanics will strip everything down, get everything ready for the next day, and then begin to do setup changes. And now actually, there's a curfew at track, so there's a time at which each Friday night the mechanics need to have left the track or stopped working on the car. And then often that means that some of the setup work is done in the morning, on Saturday morning, because the simulator information will have come in over Friday night.
Right, so there is a lot of work going on overnight in between FP2 and this session. It's a full-on Saturday, really, isn't it? All quiet, though, out on track at the moment, which means, Ted, it must be busy in the pit lane.
It is quite busy, actually. Having a look at Valtteri Bottas, Sauber's really only hope this weekend is that we get one of those crazy races of attrition. They're saying this circuit really just speaks to all of their failings. High speed, they're not quick in. 90-degree corners, they're not quick in. So Sauber set for a very, very tough weekend. So watch out for them. If they can make it even with one car out of qualifying one later today, they'll be doing very well. We're just having a look at the other green team on the grid, and that's Aston Martin. And Bernie, they've been doing some aero testing, some flow vis testing on the rear wing and the beam wing. But they've been doing that thing where they put a lap on their precious hard tyres again. And just explain to me, as much as to everybody else, why they do that. If all the teams are keeping as many new hard tyres and medium tyres for the race as possible, because they're the good ones for the race, probably not going to see the softs, are we, in the Grand Prix tomorrow, then why do Aston want to go and put a lap on them already?
Yeah, well, it's become very popular, I think, Ted, across all of the teams. You know, we've seen Red Bull do it on the soft, we've seen Sauber do it on their hard and medium as well, and I think Norris's car now that you've just seen left the pit lane with this very shiny surface on the tyre, and as we see it go through the lap, you can see it now from the Ferrari leaving the garage, the surface very, very shiny, and as he goes round the lap, gradually this band of dull tyre appears. And that dullness just takes, basically the tyre's done in a mould, and in that mould they put on like a release film on the tyre, and this is the first chance to take off that film and get down to the actual working compound that you want of the tyre. As well as that, it's an extra heat cycle through the tyre, so inevitably, as we know, as you heat and cool a tyre, you take away a little edge of the performance, but you increase its durability a little bit as well. So there's many things happening through this lap that allows a team to run this tyre for one single lap, but it's not without risk, you know, and it's very hotly debated, because if you go out on this tyre now, which is your race tyre, that hard tyre, and you get a puncture through some debris the first run in P3, there's always a risk that something's been dropped onto the track overnight, then you lose that tyre for the race, and that's a very difficult situation to end up in. We've not seen that, but the risk is always there.
Well, Lando Norris gearing up, trying to find himself a bit of space as we now get the circuit a little bit busier. Both Ferraris out there, as we've just said. Norris out there along with teammate Piastri. So too for the Alpine of Gasly. We saw the two Saubers come out as well. No lap times on the board just yet. Perez has done a few set times, but we might well see what Lando Norris has got for us then on this first bit of running as he brakes for the first corner, the left-hander, 90-degree right angle to the left, and you don't get very long, and there is a yellow flag for a stopped Esteban Ocon in the Alpine, and that's just coming, it's on the way really to the start-finish straight. He's stuck in between the kink of 17 and 18. His teammate Gasly's just about to come by.
I got a problem.
Okay, mate, understood.
Don't think I can make it.
This is really not proving to be a good weekend for them, is it? We had one car stop in FP1 with an MGUH. In fact, it was Ocon.
Yeah, well, yep.
Then we heard Gasly have an issue in FP2 where he ended up blocking Norris on his lap and having a battery issue.
I want to say as
And
well,
now
they've
this
had
again.
some issues in Baku over the last couple of years with their engine going up in smoke. So,
Yeah,
maybe
fire.
even, yeah, they had
It
a
was
fire, wasn't
last
it?
year.
Yeah.
Gasly lost FP1 with the fire. They ended up crashing in FP2. But this coming off the back of a weekend in Monza, where they were having all sorts of issues with clipping and running out of electrical energy in the races. This is really not good news for an Alpine team and particularly the engine department, which, you know, we talked about it yesterday. There's so many rumors about the engine factory in Viry-Châtillon being closed down, there are protests from the engineers and the workforce there, and there's a lot of instability in that team at the moment in terms of where people are going to be working in the future and where the engine's going to come from, and seeing a car stop. Anyway, let's listen into this first.
And it's gone.
Yeah, it's just lost power. He's able to change gears, so it's not hydraulics. It's just lost power.
And to a halt, Esteban Ocon comes. Well, it's good to see him getting out of the car, but a red flag out then in free practice 3. No lap times on the board just yet, but Ocon and Alpine with a bit of work to do. Well, Alpine, then back in the garage with Pierre Gasly. One car still in the running, but it has been a tough weekend so far for both of them. And for Ocon, well, starting his what would be his 100th Grand Prix start for Team Enstone, his 150th Grand Prix start this weekend. I think he'll be hoping for a little more movement than that as the marshals get to work and try and get that car into a safe place, Bernie.
And this is really difficult for a team now because you're sat in the garage, you don't quite know what's going wrong with the car. The engineers will be pouring through the data. It looks PU or at least drivetrain related. You know, as Corinne said, you see him changing gears there, but you hear that it sounds terrible to a mechanical engineer to hear that real crunching noise that turns around the corner. So they want to investigate, they want to get into that car, but this track is very difficult to recover a car from because you've got that sort of castle section. The track's obviously very, very tight between 6 to 7 and then 19 to 20, so there's no gap to get cars through there. So it's a struggle to recover a car during a session, and all the guys want and girls is to get it back and start working on that car to get into whatever it is to ensure it gets out for qualifying.
They're not going to get it back, are they, before the end of the session? I think from there, I just don't see, unless the race director decides to be kind and friendly to them and get the truck to drive up the track, so I just don't see how it's going to happen.
So we had a year here with Checo where I think the car broke down, or maybe it was a crash in that castle section, and he basically stood with the car on track, so to make sure that the car got cleared into a bit that we knew we could get it back from, and they sort of delayed the red flag a little bit for the others, which wasn't a great idea for them, but it meant we got our car back, so it was very, very valuable to the team.
Do you tell the drivers that before the session? Like, would the team manager say, ooh, just could you keep this in mind? And
we don't tell them that per se, but we do go through where the car can be recovered, where the fire extinguishers are, for example, where the brakes are in the barrier. So we have maps with all of that on. They know from experience that when you're in that, you know, that castle section, if we say, it's very, very difficult to get the car back, and it is important to try if we can.
16 years ago, Sebastian Vettel claimed his first victory at the Italian Grand Prix. 2008, Corinne, remember it well?
I was there. I mean, well, you were 11 years old, which is a scary thought. But I was there racing in GP2 that weekend, and I was a Red Bull Junior, and obviously he was with Toro Rosso. I was watching in the Toro Rosso pits, and I remember chatting with Gerhard Berger, who was on the podium and came down with a trophy, and it was an extraordinary day because that team had been Minardi, hadn't won anything, and then Seb won that race. Sebastian Bourdais in the other Toro Rosso was qualified well, but wasn't as quick, and it was so much water that day. Honestly, the GP2 paddock, we had like 8 inches of water with throughout the entire paddock. It was horrendous, but yeah, great drive from Seb.
Well, brilliant memories, and wow, 16 years ago to this day for that. Well, red flag still out then. The clock continues to count down in practice as the marshals try and recover that stricken Alpine of Esteban Ocon after conking out with a seeming issue. Red flag conditions then still out in free practice 3, and it is because of the Alpine of Esteban Ocon coming out of turn 16 and then stopping. Not entirely sure what the issue is, but the car just seeming to come to a halt. He was able to move gears. He's out of the car. He's fine, but that's brought the red flag, and now the marshals crew trying to get that car off in the best place possible, because Alpine will be really hoping that they can get that car back as quickly as possible.
And I guess the one thing to say on that there, Harry, is you see the marshals now with their marigolds on, not because they were planning on doing the dishes rather than recovering that car, but rather that car is in an unsafe condition at this stage, or they believe the team is at least unsure of the condition of that car, and that just prevents any electrical energy from the battery getting transmitted and injuring someone.
Yeah, well, the marshals doing a superb job in getting to that Alpine. It looks like Mercedes might be ready and raring to go to get this session back underway. It's still a red flag. Let's head down to Ted Kravitz.
Absolutely right, Harry. Yes, Mercedes are ready, raring to go because they don't have any laps on the board at the moment. George Russell was quite late getting into the car, but while we wait for some news from Alpine as to what exactly that was it an MGUH, the same as yesterday for Esteban Ocon, or a different part of the power unit, or whatever? I do actually have an update on George's engine from yesterday. So if you weren't with us yesterday, they did an oil sample from George Russell's Mercedes engine and found some bits of some filaments, some bits of metal in there that they weren't particularly happy with, and changed the engine as a precaution. So the news today is that the engine should be usable, which is good news for George and for Merck. It was a precaution to switch it so that the team could assess what might have caused those irregular bits in the sample. But I'm happy to report they don't actually have any concerns that they will not be able to use that power unit again. But Russell now out, as is Hamilton, on those soft tyres, and it is that older engine that Russell has still got in the back of his Mercedes for the rest of the weekend.
Thank you very much, Ted. Well, it's good to hear that Russell get a bit more running in. Session will resume at 12:54 local in a couple of minutes' time. So everybody then feeding out into the pit lane to try and get the best possible track position once they head out onto the circuit. So, Grun, after yesterday then, where is the pecking order? Because that seems like the tough question at the moment. Formula One is in a really good place, I think, right now. When you look back to Bahrain, and you couldn't have predicted the situation we're in now. McLaren have been the ones in form, but now it seems, and this is a bigger picture as well when you talk about the championship, that actually it's not only them now here, it's Ferrari, Mercedes.
It's been a weird year, hasn't it? And really,
is this one of the weirdest years in Formula One?
I was thinking about this. I think you actually have to go back to the late 90s to see such a swing in form. So, 97, Jacques Villeneuve, who's here with us this weekend, qualified on pole by 1.7 seconds from the best non-Williams. 1.7 seconds, that covers the whole field these days, right? But in a very short amount of time, he was being challenged very strongly by Michael Schumacher and Ferrari. And then it went to the final round in Jerez. So, you know, we saw a massive turn. And really, you have to go back to that sort of thing where, you know, Ted would remember this, 98, Mika Häkkinen and David Coulthard lapped the entire field at the opening Grand Prix in Melbourne, and yet the championship went to the final round. So, you know, we very rarely see those, such a big turn where a team and driver as dominant as Max and Red Bull were at the start of the season suddenly end up on the back foot. So, yeah, you know, I've highlighted going back to the 90s because that was a quarter of a century ago. That's how rare it is to have a weird season like this.
I mean, I think back to something like 2012, not in terms of a swing in form, but of course you had those 7 different race winners in the first 7 races, and we haven't had a season like that, well, until now, really. But it's slightly different, but in terms of there was no swing majorly in championship direction. Still went down to the wire, though, between Alonso and Vettel.
Yeah, again, that was some odd circumstances, because that was the year of what they call the Coanda exhaust systems and the way they were working with the blown diffusers, and Red Bull had a few issues with their Coanda designs in the early part of the year. And then there was some controversy around the rules at Silverstone, things like that. So, but you never saw such a big gap at the start of the season. You know, we had so many, I think it was 8 different winners that year across the season in 2012. So it was more jumbled up. This year really feels like we started as if it was just an extension of 2023. And then in Miami, it's like, all right, okay, we'll start a new season now, shall we? And well, it's just turned.
We were always going to see convergence, right? When you're in a rule set, you always get that. You know, Red Bull's dominance was not always going to last. I don't think we expected it to end this quickly.
So, very light drops of rain.
Understood. So far, we have not seen them affect the track at any point.
Piastri then with the latest weather update. We have had a few light spots throughout the day this morning, but as Will Joseph says, nothing too heavy, as Tom Stallard says, sorry, nothing too heavy to affect the track action. But we get into a rule cycle, and then the racing and the nature of it all converges, and it gets really competitive. We love the action, and then we change up the regulations again, and then, okay, Red Bull, whoever it is, might not be the dominant team anymore, but they're just replaced by another dominant team.
I know. I mean,
something doesn't seem right to me there.
Sounds like you read my column from 6 months ago when I said the rule cycle should be 6 years, not 4, because then you get 3 years of people converging, and then 3 brilliant years like we've got now, where we arrive on a Friday and have no idea who's going to be on pole on Saturday and win on Sunday. But yeah, unfortunately, the cycles seem to have been sort of 4-year cycles, and I do hope, you know, when we get to the 2026 rules, they do look at kind of prolonging the cycle a bit, because we've seen this. You know, look at 2021. I know there was a tweak to the rear flow rules, which in the end ended up favoring Red Bull and made 21 probably the most extraordinary season in F1 history, certainly one of the most, in terms of how tight it was. But then we tore up the rules again, and I think we just, yeah, I'd love for that cycle to be longer.
Just yeah, eke it out just a couple more years. If the racing's good, then why change it up? It is the question, isn't it? But of course, always looking to the future and trying to make these cars. Formula One is the pinnacle of motorsport. You're always searching for the next best thing, aren't you? And I suppose that's why the regulations are tweaked and designed, Bernie.
Yeah, exactly, and I totally agree from a racing standpoint. I do think the 2026 regulations are going to be so important from a sustainability point of view. You know, the sustainable fuel is will have a massive impact on all of our lives, hopefully. At least that's the dream going forward. So I think that is important. I think if anything, you know, from an engineering side, we've been slow to implement that sustainable fuel regulation because F1 can drive it forward. But I would love to see the racing continue. So if we could just do the fuel in these cars, that'd be perfect, because you would still get the convergence. I'm not going to get started on 26 because I'll just get on my soapbox.
We'll save that for another podcast.
Yeah, I'll just go on a rant about why I don't like them. But yeah.
Well, let's see how that all pans out. I'm sure that discussion will be had time and time again towards the end of this season, and indeed in the build-up. We've still got 2025 to get through yet. Lots of track action now, though. Pretty much everybody out on track, bar Norris. Ocon no longer in the session, and Ollie Behrman's not out there at the moment. Everybody else out there. Max Verstappen, fastest, just over half a tenth of a second with a 1:45.2. So everyone out there doing some quick running career on the soft tyre.
Yeah, well, I think one thing that is helpful with these conditions we've got at the moment, the overcast conditions and the low track temps, is that it's made the session more relevant. You know, in the past, FP3 here, because it would be so much hotter than qualifying, it was slightly on the edge of being irrelevant, even though the track got much cleaner. But having these overcast conditions has meant that the track temperature is more stable, and if that carries on in the afternoon, then this becomes really representative, which is why I think they're pushing on with the soft tyre runs. You know, they can get valuable data and information out of this early in the session. This is Albon to the top of the tyres, 44.3. It's still slower, isn't it? It's still slower than what we saw yesterday, for example. And really, I think we'd expect to see people in the 42s by the end of this session as they do their proper qualifying simulations. Bernie, what do you think?
Yeah, it'll be a big improvement again through this session. The track will have been reset a little bit overnight for sure. They should be carrying less fuel in this session than they were for P2 yesterday, so that should also help the lap time. I think some of the cars run early. You know, we would tend to run early in a P3 like this because of the risk of red flags. Now, some drivers, particularly the 2 McLarens, 2 Ferraris, got caught out a little bit there by being on that soft tyre at the point that Ocon caused that earlier red flag disruption. So although it won't have hurt the soft tyre too much, it definitely changes your preparation for the second set. So you want to try and have that soft tyre lap as close to what you will have in qualifying as possible. And doing an out, having a red flag, and then doing an out again isn't the same.
Oh, very close from Max Verstappen coming through turn 15. That was where Charles Leclerc found the wall yesterday. Verstappen, super close. As close as you want to get to the exit of the wall there, carrying as much speed as he can. Jean-Pierre Lambiase watching on from the pit lane. But it's the 2 Williams cars, Albon and Colapinto, up there, 8/10 off Colapinto, who has now got a bit of a task to recover from that crash yesterday. So we'll see him try and build up his confidence and momentum once again. Piastri on a lap at the moment. Let's head down to 10.
Just down at Williams, they're loving this. You could finish this practice session now and James Vowles would be happy, but of course it won't. But there's some pace in that Williams. We'll see how it shakes out later. Just looking at how dusty it still is on track. I know you've been talking about that. And Bernie, I was interested in what Pirelli said yesterday, that for the first time, this track has not undergone the cleaning process that had been done at previous events. Did you see that Pirelli mentioned that yesterday? And I'm interested about whether that was just because they thought, oh, well, you know, let's try not doing it, or and what impact it might have had on the grip, because it does seem to be, and all those shots of people getting close to the wall, as dusty as it was yesterday, really.
Yeah, well, it's a bit of an engineering nightmare, that really, Ted, because you've built up these years of knowledge of the scrubbing of the track, and it used to be they went round with quite aggressive scrubbing machines, really, to pick up all the dust, and you particularly see it around the pit lane area when you're doing your strategy analysis late on a Friday night. But so that would have mean that the track won't be as clean and that the dust will be on it, but it will mean just Behrman stopped in turn 1.
He's crashed. I think he's hit the barrier. Yellow flag out. We're just having a look on the Sky Race Control on board. That is the reason for the yellow flag, and it looks like the front left might well have taken a knock, so hopefully we'll see a full replay of it shortly. But Leclerc still pushing out on track, fastest of anybody in the first sector. Perez fastest of anybody in the middle sector. Hamilton personal bests all throughout the lap. He'll have to ease up though, coming down towards the start finish straight, because that's where the yellow flags are. Indeed, he won't be able to set the lap time because the red flag is out again for Oliver Behrman, we believe, who has had an incident out on track down at turn 1. We might just see him here. There he is, and when he has had contact with the barrier, Karoom.
Yeah, it's such a shame for him there, because he I was talking to his team boss Ayo Komatsu yesterday, who was full of praises for the methodical approach, kept it clean, and he was really pleased with how the first day had gone. I was saying he's done everything we want him to do, but he's parked in a very odd spot. We're about to see the replay. I think you know, he's gone straight down that runoff area where most people have tried to bail out. You can see the tire tracks. That's taken him into the barrier. So we'll get the onboard here. We've got up in race control, but we'll get the full onboard in a moment. He looks really angry with himself. Here we go. So he's struggled to make the corner, too much speed, then tried to bail out of it. He's bailed out too late. He's bailed out of it way too late, and he knows he's got it wrong. Oh, you can see him just smack the steering wheel. Look, at this point, turning in, he's too fast. He's way wide of the apex, and he needed to bail out of that. He tried to hang on to it too long, thinking, oh, I'll try and make it. He needed to bail out half a second earlier. And yeah, what we have to keep in mind is the runoff area obviously doesn't have as much grip.
Okay, Ollie. You okay?
Oh, I'm such an idiot.
Is the car damaged?
Yeah, I couldn't turn out of it in time. I'm so sorry.
Ollie Behrman then sounding dejected and very frustrated with himself there with a crash out, but he has been able then to make it back and walk back to the pit lane, not very far from where he crashed. Red flag then, another one out in free practice 3 with 25 minutes remaining, this time though for the Haas of Behrman. Marshall's then very quickly getting to work. That should be quite easy then to remove the Haas of Behrman. There's a lot of runoff area and a safe place behind the barriers down at turn 1. But another red flag, Karoom, which obviously truncates the session yet again for everybody else. So quite a crucial time before quali.
Yeah, but I don't think it's the worst time in the world, because they've all at least had a run now.
Well, Norris was on.
It was on a lap.
Hamilton was on a lap, but didn't quite get to finish it.
So let's say most people have had a run, and this would give them a chance to just stop, reset, have a think about what they're going to do for their next run. Do they switch? It's a bit early to go to the final set of tyres, I think, but as Bernie was saying before, you don't want to leave it too late, because you could get a red flag in the last 5-6 minutes. So at a normal circuit with loads of runoff area, you'd obviously see them run, you know, often in the last 6-7 minutes. I think here, Bernie, you probably go around the 10-11 minute mark just to be safe for the red flag at the end.
Yeah, you need to go that you can allow yourself another run after a red flag. So you try and run quite early. I remember in years gone by, sitting on a Friday night working out all the times that red flags had happened here in P3. and then trying to estimate how much time you needed to leave it at the end. But we've had 2 red flags already. People have struggled to get a lap together or a lap time in. You know, any mistake on your first lap to get it on the second lap, you then risk a red flag again. So it's a really tricky session to get everything together to get the best practice you can for qualifying here.
I just love the mindset of F1 engineers. They're sitting there mapping out when a red flag could be.
We have data on everything, and then we go through it, and the amount of persuading that you need to give a driver to say, we don't need the final lap at the end, we just need to get some good laps in at some point in the middle.
Well, I love what you were saying earlier about the safety car stats, and in the last 5 races here, we've had a safety car or a VSC in one or the other. Yet in the last 7 Grand Prix this season, we've not seen the safety car whatsoever. So will this be the place we get it? The last intervention we had was a VSC back in Austria. So Baku, though, is a highly likely place, and this is kind of the reason why for George Russell.
This guy's just in the middle of the road. Hey, so.
It was just a messy situation. There was 3 cars all together there, and it's a very narrow part of the track. We saw Sainz nearly get hit up the back by Perez, which I know the stewards were looking at yesterday, and rightly so, because it's so narrow, it's blind, and it's so fast on the run up from 12 towards 15. There's not much room to get out of the way there.
Well then, session literally about to get restarted at 1:08 local time, which is coming up to now. So the green light will come on at the end of the pit lane, and straight away goes out Lando Norris in the McLaren, because he will be very keen to get some more lappage in. Hasn't actually put a proper lap time on the board as he heads out, followed by the Alpine of Pierre Gasly, and the sole remaining Haas now of Nico Hülkenberg after another red flag intervention for his teammate Oliver Behrman, who is now out of the session, along with the Alpine of Esteban Ocon, who we lost a little earlier on. Well, back underway.
This guy's just in the middle of the road. Hey, so.
And George Russell finding some blockage. Here's Colapinto out on track now as we ride on board, so it can get a little bit tight around this circuit. The red flag has now gone away, and we are back to green light running for the last 20 minutes or so. Oliver Behrman and his crashed Haas car now out of the way. Behrman back into the pits, and well, we are joined this weekend by team principal of Haas, Ayo Komatsu. Thanks for joining us again and for your time. First of all, is Ollie okay, and how frustrated is he with that incident?
Yeah, Ollie is okay. Obviously, very frustrating in FP3. First push up, just completely overcooked, braking into turn 1. So yeah, very frustrating.
Yeah, he looked really particularly frustrated because it was a clumsy one, wasn't it? He was trying to steer away from the wall. It wasn't like one of those crashes we saw from Leclerc, for example. He just pushing on straight. So, I mean, how do you deal with it now? How do you, because obviously it's a crucial qualifying prep, how do you keep his confidence up? Do you change the run plan for Q1 and try and give him some laps then?
No, Q1 lap plan doesn't really change here because of the danger of a yellow flag and everything we need to be running anyway. So for me, it just really reset and get back to what he was doing so well yesterday and get the confidence back and reset going to Q1.
Okay, thanks. And in terms of general performance across the cars, obviously Hülkenberg right now is up in 3rd. How are you feeling with Hülkenberg's car, at least ahead of qualifying?
Yeah, we just have to see a bit more later in this session, to be honest, because the track's still improving quite a bit. But yeah, I think very similar to yesterday.
Ayo, it's Bernie here. Just a few things, if you might. We've seen Hülkenberg really benefit from a tow down the main straight. Can you give us a feel? You obviously don't want to give us your exact number, but how worthwhile is that to a driver at the end of the lap to get that important tow from turn 16 down to the start finish?
Yeah, it's very important. If you look at GPS race against Albon, we don't lose any time thanks to the tow. Otherwise, we'd have lost some time. So yeah, it's very important, especially in this tight midfield.
Can you put a number that Ayo? We're talking 2, 3, 4 tenths, you think, on that long straight?
It won't be 3-4 tenths, more between tenths and 2 tenths.
All right. All right, thank you so much, Komatsu, team principal of the Haas F1 team. Appreciate taking the time once again, and well, we wish for a speedy turnaround for Ollie Behrman's Haas car, which found the wall at turn 1. He is now out of the session. He's okay, back in the garage, but naturally frustrated with this crucial time taken away now ahead of qualifying. One Haas still in it though with Nico Hulkenberg. So, I mean, a tow is powerful here. The DRS also has been extended, hasn't it, for this year, and we can see Hulkenberg without anybody in front of him, but the DRS Open coming down towards turn 1, losing a bit of time in that final sector.
Yeah, we'll have a look now, because actually I could just see on the driver tracker, for example, so Yuki Tsunoda has got a slipstream behind Franco Colapinto, whereas Daniel Ricciardo in the other RB didn't, and we'll see. So Ricciardo was 341k across the line, and Tsunoda is just coming up the line now. And this will just give us some idea. So Tsunoda comes across at 345. So there you go, 4 kilometers an hour. That's what that's worth. So Tsunoda's final sector was, as Ayuka Komatsu was saying, 2 tenths in the last sector.
And Tsunoda pops up into third with that time. And we're just seeing as well, a little incident for Hamilton, who went deep down at turn 3. So momentary yellow flag was out. So he's now back up and running. And well, after not a lot of running in this session, Lando Norris has finally got a lap time on the board, and he's gone quickest. A 1:44.2. Albon, though, getting a wonderful tow in front of him down towards the start-finish straight from George Russell in the car ahead. Fastest of anybody in the middle sector. 6 tenths clear at the top for Alex Albon. Immediately displaced, though, by Charles Leclerc, who goes quicker. Just over a tenth and a half in the Ferrari with a 1:43.4. Albon gets involved in a Ferrari sandwich with Sainz popping up into third.
That was worth 7 kilometers an hour to Alex Albon compared to Franco Colapinto, who was the one, if you remember, giving Tsunoda the tow, and he didn't have one himself. So yeah, it just shows and underlines what Bernie and Ayuka Komatsu were saying earlier, the slipstream, but it's so hard to orchestrate. You just have to be in some ways lucky to be in the right place at the right time and see what other people are doing around you.
It's really difficult, because this section of track that we've seen Verstappen go through now, and as you go through the castle, that tight section, you really don't want someone ahead of you through that section of track, because it disturbs the aero coming to the car in those all-important corners where you need the car to turn predictably. The tow is beneficial because the tow helps you the whole way down the straight. So you have that reduction in drag right from turn 16 the whole way down, whereas the DRS only kicks in after turn 20. So although the DRS is improved this year, it is not going to help you until much, much later in the straight, and that's why the tow is powerful.
So yesterday we were seeing that the Red Bulls were very strong, sectors 1 and 2, but not particularly quick in sector 3 compared to the Ferraris or the Mercedes. So I'll be interested to see if they've changed the downforce style, because sector 3 is predominantly just that corner, turn 16, and it's predominantly straight lines, and these are all comfortably flat out. So it's all about drag and straight line speed, and engine mode, of course, comes into play as well. So we don't know if Red Bull were running a more conservative engine mode, and that could have been the case. DRS popping open, Verstappen fastest of anybody in the middle sector, and again losing out in the last sector there. 25.110 for him.
Didn't have anyone in front of him.
Yeah, and exactly, and that's in contrast to Leclerc's 24.901. So 2 tenths again in the last sector. So that trend from yesterday, in Verstappen's case, seems to be continuing. We'll see what Perez can do, Harry.
Across the line for Sergio Perez, who continues to showcase his good form and finds time to go fastest. Lando Norris is peeling into the pits at the end of his lap. Piastri, though, in the other McLaren, is currently fastest of anybody in the first sector. But this is good news for Sergio Perez in terms of not only his mentality and his form, but also for Red Bull, who have been lost over the last few races, seeming to have refound a little bit of that form.
And we've talked so much about team orders with this man, haven't we? What is Piastri going to do to help and support Norris? But actually, this is a weekend where Perez could support Verstappen's championship campaign and just try and stop the slide, because Perez needs a win. Perez needs, for his own career, for his own confidence, needs a win. But Red Bull, in the Drivers' Championship, need him to support Verstappen. So I think that's going to be a conversation, actually. If he does qualify well, What part does he play in that?
Do you think, as well as that, I'm not disagreeing at all, but Red Bull really need strong points on the board from both drivers this weekend, because they're more in danger of losing the constructors at this stage than they potentially are of the drivers.
They are. Yeah, but I think if they're running 1-2, they would swap Perez and Verstappen. That's my only point, is I think they would use Perez in that way. If it's Perez first, Norris second, Verstappen third, Perez will get the win, obviously. I think it's more about, it's just, if they're together, then I think they'll make them swap.
Statement lap, though, from Piastri, as we discussed that, who goes fastest by over 0.6 of a second. But this comes back to the bigger issue that we've talked about so much, I know, about these team orders at McLaren. Should they have come sooner? Should there have been a favouring of one driver over another? Okay, fine, we can talk now that they will support Lando in the event of a 50-50 situation, perhaps. Russell first.
Just check the PU. Something feels and sounds a little bit funny. Mainly under braking and off throttle. Hey, Phil.
I sort of hope that's his lead message and he's not just saying that as he's leaving the pit lane, because he's a bit late now.
Yeah, Ted, what do you know?
Hello, there we go. It was definitely a delayed message, because he's just put the soft tyres on. I do believe that George has been reassured about that, about the noise from the engine, because he's just gone out on a fresh set of softs, as has Lewis Hamilton. So all the work that Mercedes have done overnight to try and get a little bit more of speed in this car. They were kind of third quickest of Ferrari, Red Bull, and then Mercedes yesterday. Mercedes were about McLaren's level. We've obviously seen that McLaren have put some speed in the car overnight. Now we're about to get some answers from Hamilton and Russell as to whether they've made some improvements, some more improvements.
This will be really crucial, just to come back to that point, though, to see where they do stack up, because the bigger issue now for the likes of McLaren, it almost doesn't matter about the team orders, because if they've got to fight off Mercedes, Ferrari and Red Bull with perhaps two cars, then all of that goes out the window, surely.
Yeah, it only comes into play if the cars are running together, isn't it? Where it will come into play is strategically, because if we think it's, and let's ignore the safety car VSC stuff at the moment, or red flag, in a normal race it's going to be a one-stop, then there will be a crucial lap where you don't want to get undercut and things like that, and they'll favour Lando, and likewise at Red Bull they favour Verstappen. But yeah, I think it's going to be brilliant, because there's a high chance that top 8, there's going to be some jumbling up. Qualifying, of course it's important. It always is in F1. But it's much less important at this circuit than it is at most circuits. If you look at, historically, 7 out of the 21 podium finishes have come from outside the top 5 on the grid. And frankly, this is a track where you can overtake. Even with the low deck, you can overtake around here, because the slipstream is powerful. DRS has been extended as George has a little hint of a lock-up and goes into the runoff area. But I think for me, the biggest benefit of qualifying on the front row, the first 2 rows, is getting safely through these 2 corners. I think last year George making contact with Max, damaging the floor of Max's car. I think that was in the sprint, wasn't it? But you've got to get through the first couple of corners and the first lap cleanly, and the further forward you qualify is of massive benefit there.
It's only a 90-metre rundown, isn't it, to the braking zone of turn 1. So actually, if we think about McLaren and the worry over perhaps how their starts have been, it's not the end of the world, because it's a short run down. But crucially, as you say, you want to be ahead. You make it safely through turn 1, but then you've got turn 2 to contend with. We've seen the likes of Fernando Alonso starting further back, coming into this corner where
The
Russell has
ride
just
feels
gone
terrible.
off.
Down the straight and the braking.
And Russell really not a happy bunny on board that Mercedes at the moment, but especially coming into, you survive turn 1, you've got to survive turn 2 as well. 2 basically 90-degree right angle corners.
Yeah, and when he's talking about right, he's talking about the vertical movement of the car, just sort of gently bouncing or porpoising, and just not having the stability, up and down basically when he gets on the brake pedal, and that affects the contact patch. The exact place where you get on the brakes and you want the tire to be gripping the road. If you've got some movement, that's when you start to feel these lockups, and I think that it sounded like that's what he was saying could have been a contributing factor to turn 2.
Another yellow flag out momentarily in sector 1. I think it might be Pierre Gasly who's just stopped at turn 3. There's runoff there, so hopefully he's managed to just go down there and do a Yui. Hamilton, though, currently going for another lap, down in 10th at the moment. 1.5 seconds off on that time, but pushing now.
Yeah, but Gasly's yellow flag has meant that Leclerc, Sainz, Verstappen, Piastri have all been affected by the yellow flag and haven't been able to push through that sector. So Hamilton's up to the line. Leclerc's still gone fastest of anyone in that sector, despite the yellow, so one of the stewards will have a look at that. But here comes Lewis Hamilton up to the line and goes a second fastest. But look at the margin to Piastri, half a second down.
That was a mega lap from Oscar Piastri, who will be hoping to pull down a bit of a statement. Here is Charles Leclerc, though, who was going quickly through sector 1, fastest of anybody so far, makes his way through 15, and now embarks on that long 2.2-kilometre backstretch towards the start-finish line with a couple of kinks in between.
It has to be said, Piastri's looked the more comfortable of the two McLaren drivers.
Norris has looked a bit off-colour all weekend so far.
Even on the long runs, Piastri's long run on the medium was very strong. I was talking to some of the Mercedes engineers yesterday, and that was the one that they flagged as being particularly good. So they think that Piastri is bang on the money, and I'll tell you who is Charles Leclerc, who's gone to the top of the times.
You know what I want to know, though, Karun? As a driver, Leclerc clearly comes alive around this circuit. He loves it here. Pole position 3 times in the last 3 consecutive years. Hasn't taken the win, though, but that's always just been a step too far for Ferrari, as we see what happened to Gasly. Perez goes well around here. How can one track in particular bring out a driver's form more so than others? How can you have a driver favourite track?
I think it's to do with this, it's the layout of the track, isn't it? It's to do with the type of corner. And it's funny, I'll come back to this. Let's look at what happens to Gasly here, because we're coming up to it. So he's just come out of the pits, going very slowly through turn 2, gets to turn 3, and then just can't get the car slowed down enough. So I wonder, you know, he came out, maybe the brakes, still cold brakes, perhaps, because he's come straight out of the pits.
Cold brakes, cold tyres, perhaps. Still, he did pull over right on the inside coming into turn 1, didn't he? To get out of the way. Turn 2, sorry, to get out of the way.
Yeah, he didn't get to do a big stop to get the temps up on the brakes, so maybe a bit of that. But to answer your question, as Russell goes 3rd fastest and 4 tenths down, Albon is about to finish his lap. I think Verstappen actually has a very smooth driving style. And around the circuit, as Albon goes 5th, you've actually got to have a bit of aggression in the way you turn the wheel. And if you watch Max, when a circuit like Suzuka, which has got grip in it, and it's got these long flowing corners like the Suzuka S's, he is utterly sublime. You know, he's really unbeatable there. But when you got these sort of short, sharp corners where you have to be quite aggressive actually with the wheel, you know, people think of Max being this aggressive driver, but actually when you watch his steering inputs, and I spent quite a bit of time last year looking at this in terms of driving style, he's got a very smooth style. And I think that's why he's not, I know he's won here before, but this isn't one of his like super strong circuits compared to Perez.
No, not at all. Norris, though, embarking on another lap, and actually got a nice bit of tow from the RB of ahead of him. I think it might have been Daniel Ricciardo. So Norris starting with his hot lap with a nice tow advantage as he sets off. Bernie, we'll let you go because we know you've got to run down to the paddock with just over 5 minutes left as the final quick laps come in. Leclerc and Piastri, though, have come back into the pits as Norris, the rear just sliding out a little bit on that McLaren.
Yeah, he's a bit down, isn't he, in the first sector of the lap. He's got a few more laps on this tyre. Has that on Norris, has he? No, actually, no, he's not. This is the first set. So this is a good representative run. Verstappen, by the way, has popped up into 3rd now, so he's 3 tenths down on Leclerc's time. And Norris charging up to 15. Russell getting nicely out of the way. On the brakes, move to the right, into the left, no lock up there, dropping downhill towards 16. We'll get the second intermediate time. Not bad in terms of the middle sector, and now we'll be able to see what has McLaren got in terms of straight line speed at this stage. You know, they might well turn the engines up, well, they will all turn the engines up for qualifying, but don't really see a slipstream. Maybe a distant toe there for him from Bottas and Tsunoda.
Well, he got one to start the lap initially, but it would be a distant toe. Better middle sector compared to first, and he does go quicker and finds time and puts that McLaren up into second. Immediately gets out of the way for the Williams that sweeps round. So the two McLarens then, Norris in second, Piastri third. Over a tenth and a half back though from Charles Leclerc's fastest time. So it's the Ferrari man that feels like he might well be the one to beat once we get into qualifying a little later on. I tell you, we haven't seen much or spoken much about this man, Carlos Sainz.
This was huge. Oh, what he just did was crazy.
Which one of the Red Bulls was it? Was that Perez?
Oh, he did try and get out of the way, but it was too late.
Oh, he should have got up much earlier and stayed to the left. Was that Perez or Max?
I think it was Perez.
Okay.
I think it was. But that was a little bit too close for comfort for Carlos Sainz.
It's a bit of tit for tat, wasn't it? It was the other way around yesterday, about 300 meters earlier on the lap. And Sainz nearly...
But this is going to be the biggest factor for qualifying later on, right? And we spoke to Bernie earlier about really half the battle, once you take out the red flag, the yellow flag scenarios, is going to be placing yourself on the track, having enough clear space in front of you, but also trying to get the benefit of having someone in front of you down that long 2.2 kilometer back straight onto the start-finish line with a toe, giving you those extra kilometers an hour, but then you don't want them in front of you coming through the middle sector. So that's going to be the biggest battle. We're going to be absolutely monitoring the driver tracker throughout qualifying, because that will be the key to a good lap and making your best qualifying effort for the race on Sunday. But just a couple of minutes left then of running. Russell on his way at the moment, not without his issues so far in this session. Decent middle sector, kind of matching Oscar Piastri, and a little bit quicker actually in the sector one. Let's see what Russell has got in the Mercedes when he comes across the line. Perhaps a distant toe. Wow. Finds time, a lot of time in that final sector. Goes fastest by half a tenth of a second.
And it was a distant toe. That was that wasn't like him running right up, wasn't right up the gearbox of Sainz's Ferrari. So Mercedes have got the straight line speed. They have taken some downforce off, and they are right in the money. This is going to be brilliant. Perez, an improvement in sector one, coming up to the second sector time now. We've got a panel flashing. It's quite hard to tell whether that's a white or a yellow, if I'm honest, but he's lost a bit of time in the middle sector. Doesn't have a car in front of him, so no slipstream here.
And the yellow flag are now out in sector one. So that's
Hulkenberg at turn 3.
So that's where, so a little bit further away for Perez, but then losing time in that middle sector. What has Perez got along the line? Comes up to the DRS detection point, flips open the rear wing, and across the line for Perez. No, lost time in those last two sectors, stays down in 6th spot, about half a second away.
But his tyres have now done 6 laps, Harry, so I think, you know, whereas Leclerc, look at that, that is an improvement now, only 13 thousandths off, and his tyres have done, that's a second push lap on it. Sainz, 10.5 down in the first 2 sectors. So I'm just looking at the straight line speed. Leclerc was 3.39, Russell 3.42. Yeah, so and Leclerc, so Perez 3.39, Verstappen 3.38, Leclerc 3.40. So they were similar. Russell a little bit ahead. So the Mercedes do have the straight line speed advantage. Sainz only 6th fastest.
Sainz then, decent in the middle sector, but losing time in sector 1 and sector 3. So one Ferrari up in 2nd, the other down in 6th. But really, when it comes to Baku, it's Charles Leclerc who has the form over Carlos Sainz.
Sainz has never outqualified a teammate here.
Never qualified higher than 4th here, has Carlos Sainz.
Yeah, but being, you know, even in the different teams he's been in, never outqualified teammates. So that's quite a tricky one for him, especially. It's a fun one because this is a track where Leclerc is extraordinarily strong and Sainz does seem to be slightly behind.
The pendulum really swings here between the Ferrari drivers. What's this from Nico Hulkenberg? This was one of the reasons for the yellow flag, making his way down the escape road, or thought about trying to do a UE. Does he have enough room? Or not quite, and has to do a little bit of a 3-point turn then, but Hulkenberg back on his way and out onto the circuit. The checkered flag is out then, so final laps happening or have been taken. Max Verstappen still trying to push down on time in the first sector, but up overall still on George Russell through the middle sector, down on his own time though. So that highlights how good Verstappen's lap was. Let's see, he'll get a bit of a toe. Oh, will it be a toe or slightly in the way for his teammate Sergio Perez, who does get out of the way. Might have been in the nick of time. We'll see how that affects Verstappen. Comes across to the DRS line towards the checkered flag, takes it. Does improve in that final sector and improves his time, stays in 5th though. So that's the other thing we might watch out for, like we see in Monza so many times as Gasly comes up to the line. Sometimes teammates trying to orchestrate a little bit of toe and helping each other out in qualifying as Gasly crosses the line down in 15th, improves his time right at the end. Still 1.3 seconds adrift though of George Russell's Mercedes. So perhaps we might well see the 2 Red Bulls, perhaps the 2 Ferraris, indeed McLaren, all trying to orchestrate some sort of toe and help each other out during qualifying later. But that will be free practice 3 done and dusted. And I tell you what, Ted, it's setting us up for a very tasty qualifying. Yeah. Indeed. Well, the other thing, though, Ted, as well, is sometimes with the red flag scenarios here, the yellow flags, maybe going out and setting a bank a lap might well be in your best interest, at least get a lap time on the board. I'll tell you what, though, just quickly, Ted, with Esteban Ocon and his Alpine, do we know any more about what his issues were out on track? Because he's going to be very much, along with Oliver Behrman, on the back foot for qualifying later this afternoon.
No confirmation from Alpine. The only word they've had is that we experienced, quote, a technical issue, which certainly covers all the bases. So we'll give them the benefit of the doubt. I mean, Esteban said he lost power. You heard them. Was it a sort of mechanical grinding sound?
Yeah, he could still change gears, but so it didn't feel like it was a hydraulic problem. Yeah. But certainly just coming out of 15 into 16.
Whether that's the sort of, you know, grinding of an engine problem somewhere, or it could be, you know, whatever you say, gearbox or energy recovery system, could be anything. But yeah, they're not saying at the moment, but they are going to have to wait to get that car back. Somewhere who might be in a bit of luck, if there is one, and silver linings for Ollie Behrman, is that once the practice starts have been done and the session is officially over and the track is declared cold rather than hot, the Haas mechanics can just pop out of their garage, turn left, and then it's about 20 meters over to where Ollie Behrman's car is. And they can just happens to be on the other side of the track, but they can just get the guys to wheel it over if that front left tire isn't too squiffy in terms of its direction, and they could start the repairs. They'll get that car fixed in time for qualifying there, no problem.
Let's hope so. Thank you very much, Ted, and thank you for Karun and Bernie in the commentary box with me as well. And this is how the session ended. Russell fastest ahead of Leclerc and Norris. Piastri, Verstappen, Sainz, Perez all up there as well. Qualifying could well be tight in the second half of the field, though. Times to find for the likes of Fernando Alonso and the Aston Martin. Spicy fight between RB, not forgetting the Haas of Nico Hülkenberg now, with Oliver Behrman crashing out in that session with work to do, and for Esteban Ocon and the Alpine, work to do as well. Not long to go, though, until we qualify next, and I think it's going to be an absolute cracker.